Are you or anyone else you know interested in buying or selling a home? How about saving the planet? Climate Change Realty is the only company operating in all 50 states that allows you to create thousands of dollars in donations absolutely for free. Yes, that's right. Our service and your donations are free. Climate Change Realty can connect you with one of the best real estate agents in your city. And because of that connection, a full 25% of your real estate agent's commissions will be donated to a 501c3 nonprofit organization of your choice. Real estate agents earn between 2 to 3% of the final sales price when they help you buy or sell a home. That's at least $500 donated for every $100,000 worth of real estate sold when you find your real estate agent with Climate Change Realty. Visit www.ccrboulder.com today and click Find an Agent to help us transform the real estate market into a battery for the regenerative economy. Welcome to the podcast. Mike, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here, man.
Thank you very much, Ethan. It is a pleasure to be here with Climate Change Realty. Not reality, although it's involved.
Right.
But Climate Change Realty. Great project, Ethan.
I appreciate it. Climate Change Realty, that's me. But this show is about you. And we always like to get it started with a little bit of background on who you are and how you got to be doing what you're doing at the current moment.
Cool. Well, thank you for inviting me on the show. It's been quite a journey. I started out in Chicago. I'm the youngest of 5 kids, all boys. And my mom always found time to do social work. So that really kind of put an impression on me in terms of you got to give back. Even if you're busier than get out, you really have to give back. And how do you give back? Well, you know how this works. When you get out of school and you're all like full of fire and you're going to change the world. Well, I was going to change the world, and I went to Mexico to tell the Mexicans that I'm here to help change the world. Well, how about that for irony, right? You go to one of the oldest cultures in the world, you say, I'm here to change the world. Well, obviously, they weren't very excited about my arrival, nor were they just like, oh my God, thank goodness Mike is here. No, they were more, shall we say, reserved about the reaction to that. And for me, it was a big education in terms of, if you're going to change the world, perhaps the first thing you need to do is learn to listen. And I mean, I think, seeing what you're doing on this program, you showed a great capacity to listen. And I think it's something that's lost in a lot of conversations, a lot of dialogues. We don't have enough capacity to hear folks rather than just to go, what do you need to do? That's really easy. It's harder to listen. And so I spent better part of 25 years listening. I worked as a journalist throughout the Americas for about 25 years in Mexico and Brazil and Miami. And that was where I had my first sort of big learning, was just learning to listen over 25 years as a journalist.
Why do you think us as a young person, we want to just go out and change the world? Because that's like, I felt the exact same way. At 17, we were plotting, me and my friends were sitting together plotting a scheme about how to take over the world with our giant business models. What do you think causes that tendency, specifically with Americans?
Well, I think there, especially Americans, you have a sort of a privilege and you're unaware of where you're coming from. So you give yourself rights that may not be yours in terms of maybe not correspond, but you really are born into a privileged society where you are doing things that you're not always listening. And so that's why it helps. As much as getting outside of the country, you learn about other places. It allows you to learn about yourself. You hold up a mirror and you can see what's going on, and some of the assumptions that you made, other people don't necessarily hold true. I don't know, when you went to Australia, were you defending the flag when you first got there? When they said, oh, Americans are like this, Americans are like that? And you had, no, that's not true. That's not. Did you go into that route or no?
I was like, yeah, it's like they're like he's such a typical American, and I was like, hey man, I'm just me. Like I'm my own breed. That's what I would say. I said I was this unique thing. I didn't represent America, but yeah, the view of Americans outside the country is very interesting. And then when I finally came back, the real responsibility of being American really dawned on me, and how we do have such a large influence on the whole global system.
We do, but I don't even think that's entirely true. I think it's more about what you can do in your community.
Sure.
I think it cuts to as close as you can to be where you have control. As you talk about the bigger world, things get farther from your control. You have to
Hmm.
work collectively to make things happen bigger. If you think about where you are and where you're having the biggest impact, it's in your immediate sphere of influence. It's friends and families, it's your community, and what's really cool about it is you put a deposit in and you see it come back to you. You make an effort towards the community and you see people appreciate it, enjoy it. That's richness. That's really, really, really wonderful. And those communities sometimes are defined by national boundaries and all of that, but increasingly not so much. I mean, you've got a lot of community that's happening beyond what the traditional constructs of where your community would lie. I mean, you're doing a podcast that's going to go to people all across the country. Si fuera en español, puede ser que vaya otra comunidad. We could be doing this here, you and I. I'm in Tucson, you're in Boulder, for people anywhere in the world. So it's exciting world we're in, and community has changed in nature, but it really is where I think most effective things get done inside a community.
Yeah, I mean, when it came to my like personal journey,
Mm-hmm.
it was about using what made the most sense to me and spending my time doing things that I could realistically see myself doing. And then it came down to always wanting to speak to people, and that's why I love this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And the ambition to change the world, it's not really and it was not really about that for me. It's about how much of a positive impact can I generally have. It doesn't mean that I need
Mm-hmm.
to influence changes and make the system work
Mm-hmm.
differently. It just needs to be pushed, or I just see myself as a vessel to make it more positive, which I guess at the end of
Mm-hmm.
the day does end up being change. But so why did you end up focusing on specifically like nature conservation work?
Well, what happens is over time you go through phases. So when I went through the phase of being a journalist, I went from being a reporter to an editor to a business owner. In terms, I owned the magazine for a business magazine called Latin Trade for about a decade. So when that whole phase ended, I sold the magazine in 2009 in the big dip and all that. I got back to thinking I want to change the world, and I got an opportunity to join the Nature Conservancy in Chile.
Mm-hmm.
And so that opened up a new world for me because I was finally getting back to trying to change the world with a major organization that had the props and the chops to do it. You're talking about the largest environmental organization in the world. What was really interesting about that organization and what I learned was one, they had a ton of really talented people. And what this organization did best was build these amazing plans and execute them for conservation. So it was, you know how like you get an opportunity and if you don't prep for it, you don't do very well.
I
These
found that.
folks were ready, right? It's like ready. If Ethan says go, we're going, right? And so it was really, really fun to be involved with a group that was just so solid in terms of they knew their shit and they were not walking around going, we own all this. No, they were thinking, how do we get people on board? Because that was the second big lesson. As big as they couldn't go anywhere without bringing everybody along. So we had an example. We had this big project in southern Chile where the organization bought a property from a bankrupt timber company. This is a property of maybe 150,000 acres in a really, really, really small town in southern Chile called Chaiwin. So, of course, you buy the property, and the folks in Chaiwin show up at the door and say, hey, what do you guys got in the way of work? Since we're not going to have the timber mill, what are we going to have here? And we're like, conservation, right? So you're starting out from like, we've got basic needs here. We need to meet these things. And so it was exciting because the team was effective at one, finding things for them, how them to get involved as park guards, as tour guides, and things of this sort. But more importantly, they sat down with the community and they said, what do you want this place to be? Let's dream a little bit. Let's draw out a plan of what this could be. And that became the conservation plan for the entire area in terms of the property we own, but the surrounding areas. And amazingly enough, people started to buy into the vision.
Mm-hmm.
So the Chilean government created a national park in the area. So you had permanent protection of part of the area so we would never screw it up again. And then you had the first carbon sequestration project ever done, documented in Chile. And we raised $5 million doing that project. And they helped us do the inventory, do all of the counting, all of that. And then you had a major mining company, the largest mining company in the world, that saw the project, believed in the project, and selected it out of projects worldwide to fund for $20 million. All of this from a plan that these folks helped us create. And so that's like, wow, we can move, we can get some stuff done here if we get clear of the plan. What's the plan? And then start working on that plan and the little bits of it. And it took 15 years, but it was really thrilling to see how a community could make something happen for themselves, working in alliance with the Nature Conservancy, with other international NGOs, with local government, with federal government. It was cool and a real lesson about, hey, I think they call it a magic canoe. How somehow when you create a project that's got enough steam to it, people start wanting to get into the canoe. Yeah. And it's a magic canoe because all kinds of people can get into the canoe, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it just goes. And so I think that, for me, as a taste of conservation, was amazing.
Sounds it. What makes a mining company get interested in a conservation project in Chile?
Well, apart from like Colorado, like Arizona, mining is big in Chile. The mining companies think 50 years. They think into the future because they're thinking of reserves and how they're going to operate and what's going to be. And one of the big challenges for mining companies around the world is the sort of license to operate. So if I'm going to install myself in your town, how do I get community approval to operate within your town? And if you think it on a larger scale in terms of a country, how do you get licensed to operate in a country if all the people see you do is drag out rocks, crush them, take the mineral oil, and rape and pillage the country and never leave anything behind? So a lot of these mining companies put major amounts of resource into philanthropic efforts, part to improve their standing in the community, but also as a way of giving back, because they see that this has got to be a win-win. It can't be just them winning all the time.
That's a very interesting, it's an interesting thing. That's a fair amount of money to invest essentially in the favor of the people of the area. Because I took it that they won't be obviously mining on that conservation project, but they're doing that to say, hey, we support this. Can we go extract some stuff? Mm-hmm. Can we go extract some stuff over here though?
No, there's definitely a quid pro quo. Don't make it. I'm not making any excuses. The miners, they will have accidents. They've had accidents. They'll destroy things left and right. Oil and gas, the same thing. But some of them trying to make an effort to give back. And yeah, it's a trade-off. I think the real question is, are they looking at the long-term resource use in terms of a way that's sustainable? And I think it's been an uphill struggle, but they're getting there slowly, but they're getting there.
How have you seen trends in like the conservation space change throughout your career?
Oh, I mean, you got a lot of them. I mean, I think the biggest one that we're living now would be, or one of the biggest ones would be, if we were to turn back the clock 20, 30 years, you had people predicting climate change disasters. You're predicting a lot of pollution consequences for what we were doing, and now we're living it. It's no longer prediction. It's no longer a theoretical exercise. Tier 1 water shortages in the West. I mean, that's not something that most people could contemplate would happen in our lifetimes, and it's here. It's now. So I think that's one huge trend, because I don't really have to speak a lot to convince you that these issues are real and present. You may feel disenfranchised in terms of you may not feel equipped to deal with these issues in terms of I can't do anything about what all of these other people are doing. And I would vote that you're wrong. But the second issue that I think is important that has been a trend over the years is who's at the table. If you look at it in the past, talking about generating a solution in the Colorado River Basin without the tribes at the table, that's not a solution. Talking about generating a solution if Mexico's not at the table, that's not a solution. Even as basic as talking about a solution if women aren't at the table is not a solution. It's these groups that are not in power, but are majorities, often in cases, or they hold substantial amounts of resources to bear on these problems that traditionally weren't at the table that now are getting a chair at the table. And that's really important because if you're not doing that, then you're not building a sustainable solution. When you leave people out of a discussion, it's not very likely to be sustainable because at some point, these groups are going to raise their hand and say, hey, I was never included in all this. And they have to be included for it to be a workable long-term solution. I think one of the best ones right now that you see, and it's a real struggle, is the Colorado River Basin water talks. What are we going to do? Right? You've got everybody there saying we've got to do something because we don't have enough water. What is it going to be?
I don't have the answer.
Ethan, come on now.
So tell me about the work that you're doing at the, how is it pronounced? Sonoran Institute. Sonoran Institute.
Yeah, so the Sonoran Institute has been around for about a little over 30 years. And if you were to say to me, Mike, what is the Sonoran Institute all about? I could tell you the mission. We're connecting people and communities with the resources that nourish and sustain them. But I think what you would really be interested in is saying, Mike, what's the secret sauce? If you were just to share between you and me, what is it that you do or that the Sonoran Institute does that nobody else does or doesn't do as well as we do? And I think in its essence, what the Sonoran Institute does is community-based conservation focused on collaboration. So what that means is instead of looking at the entire Colorado River Basin and saying, oh, we need to talk to the federal government, we need to talk to Colorado, Arizona, California, and Mexico, all about these big issues up here, we take the opposite approach. We go down to the bottom and we say, okay, guys, you're under the gun. You're not going to have enough water. Or you're not thinking, you want to develop, and that's great. We want you to develop. How can we make sure that you have the water that you need or the green spaces included in what you need so that you can grow into the future? It isn't just this 5 years and then things table off and you can't do anything more. That's where our strength lies. That's where we have traditionally been strongest and will continue to be strongest in terms of talking to communities about how they can shape their future.
So let's back up a little bit. What exactly is going on with the Colorado River Basin?
So the Colorado River Basin, you're looking at a basin that I would say, if I were to put it in a nutshell, you'd say that probably about 20% of the water resources have been lost over recent years. So we are now looking at a Colorado River Basin that when we did the original compact in the 1920s, we had all the water divvied up and there was enough water to go around for everybody and everything was copacetic. Now, with the way things are going, and as I say, I don't have to convince you about this. If you're a skier, how was the ski season up to December? Did you have any snow? Or, if you're down in Mexico, is the Colorado River connecting to the ocean right now? These are the sorts of issues where it's no longer sort of hypothetical, it's real, and you're living it. And so with this shortage that's coming, generated both by how we've intervened in the river and climate, we really need to think about how we're going to use our resources going forward. And so that's the big question of we're going to have to realign how we use water. So everybody, big cities, are looking at it and saying, we continue to grow, we're booming, we are expanding, and yet we need to rethink about how we use water. What can I do so that I've got a more secure future in terms of water? If I'm in Denver, if I'm in Las Vegas, or if I'm in Phoenix, different problems because you have different sources of water, but you can do some of the same things. Things as basic as, and you've probably seen this, low flow toilets.
Yeah.
You've completely changed the use of water. It's half the amount of water. Or you can look at things like here in Tucson, we have purple pipes all over the place. You know what purple pipes mean? Purple pipes mean they're using reused water. This is treated water that they're using to water parks, golf courses, things of this sort. Instead of taking tap water, they're using this water after it's been used. They treat it and then they use it to irrigate. You can save huge amounts of water. And you've also seen here, and above all, you see the use of xeriscape landscaping. You don't need to have a lawn, stupid grass, as they call it, in your front yard. Mm-hmm. I know it's a tradition and all of that, but
no, it sucks.
It's just that, right? And so these are the sorts of things where people just are getting it. They're thinking it through, and they're saying we can continue to grow and reduce our water footprint. Folks out on the farm, rural areas, who are really getting, they call it buy and dry. I go up to you and I say, hey, you've got water rights. I'll buy you out and just don't use the water and I'll take the water and we'll be good. Well, your farm, your family has been in cattle ranching or agriculture for generations. So you're basically going to somebody and saying, stop your way of living and get off the land. And that's not acceptable. You can't do that to people and just say, oh,
right,
there's no more water, you got to go. What you can do, though, is you can work out things. You can figure out ways whereby drip agriculture or other uses of water, how you use water, when you use the water, you can begin to have that dialogue. The West Slope versus the Front Range. That dialogue has to happen. I know it's a difficult one, but it has to happen. And so it's really exciting because that's what's going on. There's a whole series of things going on. People addressing these issues in different ways, but they're talking because they have to. And, I have been just blown away by the amount of collaboration on the Colorado River when you would think, well, I'm upstream. What do I care about you downstream? No, there's a real sense of collaboration. There is a dialogue there that I wouldn't have expected. And it's that sense of community again that I think is at the heart of all of this. We are in this together. It's not sustainable if we don't all benefit from how we're using these resources.
Well, I'm 100% with you when it comes to purple pipes or gray water or better water conservation. But I mean, is it truly a finite resource? If it were, if we were to just conserve, would that just still kick the can down the road and we would eventually run out of water? Like at some point, or does water have the potential to actually regenerate like other life sources do?
Well, you can regenerate how you capture water. You definitely have climate change that's changing the dynamics of water. So the snowpack melts, so you don't have as much water with evaporation. You lose water. So you are having water, more arid places created and wetter places created. Your challenge here in terms of a finite amount of water is not as great at this point as you might think, because part of it is how we assign the use of water. So right now, about 80% of the water, 70% of the water goes for agricultural purposes. Right? So you have the water is there, it's how we're assigning it. If you choose to move away from agriculture towards cities, as you say, you're not creating more water, you're redirecting water. So you may still go over time, have the same problem, but it's not as sharp as you might imagine. These are complicated negotiations. As I say, you're telling people who've been farming for generations, don't do that anymore. And they don't want to do that. The cities are struggling for water. Should all of this water be going to California? There's a big fight. Californians don't get along well with other people and all that. How do we build community, right? Well, I'm saying right now, how many times do you see people come into Colorado and say, I'm leaving California? Is that all you're asking for a house? Here, I'll pay cash. And everybody's like, you're making real estate prices, right?
Yes.
That's what's going on. And so that tension replays itself in differing ways. The upside to all of that is we are all part of the same community. So finding ways to channel that energy towards positive good, half your commission going to a non-for-profit. Great. You can give back to the same community that is moving forward the real estate prices. This is finding ways to incorporate, say, affordable housing, things of this sort. These are not zero-sum games. They can be wins for everybody if we think them through. That's all.
How can conservation projects actually empower local communities?
As you build resilience in a community, it gains power. So, as I say, if you look at it from the top, you're saying, oh, well, we've got to do these things. If you look at it from your community's perspective, in the measure that you can slow down water in your neighborhood, you have water that's perhaps feeding your park. If you don't have a local park, maybe you should have a local park. So all of a sudden you've got a green space, and that creates health benefits for your community. It helps with things like extreme heat events. If you have trees and canopy and all that, that's going to be a benefit for your community. That is something that, again, plays into a bigger picture, because if everybody's doing that, you've got trees that are absorbing carbon, you've got the water slowing down, so it's going back into the aquifer. You're not just ripping through resources and kind of going, oh, well, the guys downstream can deal with it, where it won't be sustainable for you and it won't help anything bigger. So you're going against a virtuous circle. By being self-sufficient and working out these issues, you can help contribute to a bigger solution.
Yeah, but in order to be interested in that, I think you have to kind of see yourself as part of something more. And I don't think everybody is like that, specifically in the US. I think you asked me about my experience in Australia in the beginning. And one of the things I noticed right away is that I would walk around campus with my headphones in, listen to my own music, and I would do my own thing. And I'm American, and we walk to class by ourselves and stuff. But everyone on campus in Australia was like in pairs or in groups. So I think one of the things we fight with, and we have a lot of arguments in this country, is because everyone kind of sees the world through their own lens globally, but specifically in the US, there's this really intense individualistic culture, which makes it hard to come to agreements,
I hear you, and I think there's definitely a lot of truth in what you say in terms of, especially out west, this independence. I'm going to go my way, and that's the way it's going to be. But you know what's curious about that? It's a shared culture.
Of individualism.
Yes, it's a shared culture. And so it's something that you can, in fact, reinforce in the sense of making people see that by taking good decisions, their decisions, they gain more control over their lives.
Definitely.
This is the farmer who goes towards low water use crops. He begins to gain more independence by doing that. This is the person in the city who begins to capture, solar energy off their roof. They're doing it for an individualistic purpose. I grant you. Mm-hmm. They want to have their own energy supply. They want to be independent.
Right.
Well, if enough of them do it, then all of a sudden we're starting to get a collective action there that people are doing something that's helping us all out.
Right.
And that's where I think, a little bit of nudging, a little bit of leadership, and a little bit of guidance, people will identify the right things to do. What is interesting here in the West particularly is that same rugged individualism includes a very strong sense of community. Very strong sense. I've been impressed. I agree with you. There are a lot of people like, I'm in my world, I'm doing my thing. Those same people are the ones who show up to the community events. It's really odd in terms of what you're saying, in terms of I hear it, I see it, but they also have 100% dedication to their communities. They will serve for their communities. They will volunteer for their communities. We went out to pick up trash on the Santa Cruz River here in Tucson the other day. We had 200 people out there picking up trash.
Wow.
Okay, and you say, Mike, how is this individual, they didn't throw the trash in the river. And the funny thing is, these people are looking for the hardest things to get. There's a tire buried. We're all working on trying to get the tire out. They were not doing it half-assed. They were in it to win it. And I don't know how to explain that sort of conflict of cultures in terms of individual versus community, but there's so much community here. It's really exciting. Really, really impressive.
Well, it's almost like American culture versus human nature. There are these chemicals that flow through your brain, like serotonin, when someone like claps for you and it's like, yeah, it was Ethan, blah, blah, blah. And then you get this rush of good feelings. And then when you're working together to pull a tire out and you're all working on the same cause, that's the oxytocin, the camaraderie pushing you to continue wanting to do that. That's a natural thing where we used to live in tribes of 150 people and collaborate to go get the meal. And at the end of the day, we get the dopamine rush when we would eat it. That's what I always love to talk about this idea of enlightened self-interest, considering others above yourself being the best way to serve yourself. And that's from a French philosopher who was observing America. And he's like, in the 18th century, he's like, why is this country working so well? Everyone's working for themselves, but in the pursuit of serving others. And that's why the economy was working so well in the US. We'll see. It might have eroded a little bit lately, but the foundation is still there. So as far as like specific projects that the Santaran Institute is currently working on, what are the main endeavors that you're currently undertaking?
In our institute, we have a bunch. There's 4 major ones. We do something called Growing Water Smart, which is our bread and butter in terms of community-based engagement with municipalities and counties throughout the West. What we do is we help them work on making plans for the future, stewarding their natural resources. So we bring together people at Fort Collins. Say, okay, you guys can see the issues. Let's see how you're going to manage your water going forward. We hold a workshop, then afterwards we would give them money to develop a plan so that they move that plan forward. And what's gotten really interesting is it's gotten deeper in the sense that, okay, you got a plan, you're moving forward on that plan, let's measure it. How's it going? Did what you come up with work? So that you can adjust and change, and then others, you can share best practices. Look, guys, we tried that. This one really helped. Outdoor water use was a big win, and we'd recommend it to you. If you're looking at doing it in your county, do it this way. And that's become a real sort of network or opportunity in terms of getting people who are working on these issues throughout different states talking to each other about these issues. It's been a real huge win. We've done probably representatives of about half the state of Colorado in terms of population, and we introduced in Arizona, and we're probably up to somewhere about 15 to 20% of the Arizona population, and then later this year or next year we'll be going into California with the same program. So that program has been really successful, award-winning. We do it together with the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. Really great partners in terms of just people who see the issue and say, okay, there's nobody helping these communities figure out what to do. And it's not that we go in and we go, you should do this. No, it's we provide the convening forum so that they can figure it out, and we give them some money. And so that's really exciting to see people figuring it out and working on their own. The other big one we do is we work in the Colorado River Delta, which is in Mexico where the Colorado River connects to the sea. That has not been happening until recently. Because we've had so much intervention in the Colorado River, it stopped connecting to the sea. So our team, together with a bunch of organizations, as part of the Raise the River Coalition, said we can change this. It doesn't have to be this way. And so we started to restore, together with other organizations, bits and pieces of the Delta. And that meant, one, getting water to flow. So the government's agreed to put water back into the river so that we could keep this going. It meant planting trees. It meant getting communities engaged again in their natural resources. So Probably about 600 acres have been recovered that way. And it's truly amazing because you think about it in terms of on paper, this is what's supposed to happen, and this is coming next, and this is how it goes next, and we'll do this and that and the other. You don't think about the intangibles, what happens. For example, beavers are on the endangered species list. They started showing up to our restoration sites. We don't know where they came from, right? It's like, okay. And, the beavers just do what they do. They're engineers. They start damming water and they start creating. And so it's just really cool because nature just takes over. Birds start returning. And even the people begin to see things that are just amazing. We have Antonia Gonzalez is a leader of the Cucapa tribe in Mexico. And she has been a really huge help for us in terms of understanding the meaning of where we're working and what the importance of the land is, especially for their culture. And her mother passed away last year, unfortunately. But before she passed away, her mother got to see river in the Colorado River again. And so it's really, really, impactful because you say, this is a woman who is telling her daughter, look, this used to have water. When I was a young girl, this used to have water. And, being kids, you're kind of like, yeah, right. But for her to be able to see it again before she passed and be able to celebrate with her daughter the meaning of that, well, that's huge. That's, you're beginning to get back to where you were. And, when the water flows in the Delta, people come out to see it. The first time we took part in the Pulse Flow in 2014, people came out to see the water. We didn't expect it. We thought, well, it's almost like an engineering project. We're getting the water back in the river, but everybody came out to see it. They were playing it. It's like, oh, we've lost a connection here, right? And I mean, the current day time, we're working the Santa Cruz River on the same issue. And, it's really interesting. Because of COVID, people are much more aware of nature than they were in the past. Because where can you go and be safe but nature? You can go out and have a hike. And you don't have to worry about wearing a mask and all that. You can go out and do what you do. And so we've been really fortunate. On the Santa Cruz River, which is our other major project, we're working. It's a crazy river that starts in Arizona, goes into Mexico, and then flows north towards Tucson. And so we're working with a whole group of people to get that river flowing again, because through all of our interventions over the years, we've dried out the river. And so by using water from Nogales, the effluent or used water out of Nogales, we can get water back into the river. And so you're restoring a river back to health. You're seeing things happen again. The natural cycle is happening again in terms of once you add water, the trees come back, the species
Wildlife.
animals come back. And so you start to get back into a space where it's really exciting because you're bringing something back to life that we need.
Not only do we need, but when you think about resources, people immediately think of minerals and oil. And when you think about the most pivotal, essential, most amazing resource in the world, there's no doubt in my mind, of course, it's water. And when you go and you sit next to a brook and you hear it babbling and you stick your hand in, it's just like, oh, like this is the source of everything. And we take it such for granted. We just flip a switch and it starts coming out like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And then we like defecate in it and then waste all this drinking water that just sucks it down. It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I don't know if composting toilets or gray water is the solution, but this stuff, like, we definitely take it for granted and it's so essential. And I could totally see how a bunch of people who have had their river dried out from when they were kids, there was maybe a little bit of water and then it's been dry for years, can come back and be like, oh, it's like life is returning to the community. It's just probably an amazing feeling. What have you and the organization learned through international cooperation between states in the U.S. and like in Mexico, facilitating that transfer or whatever rejuvenation of the water stream into the ocean?
The cross-border problems are, it's interesting because we find that there's the same sense of community everywhere. Community is the basic. that basic building block, whether you're in Mexico, whether in the US, or you're cross-border, applies. It's part of a community. There are a good majority of people who see community, who reinforce and support that community. So for us, it's taking part in enabling that group to move forward. So, as I say, the work on the Colorado River has become increasingly inclusive, and we are really excited about that. The fact that the tribes are getting a seat at the table to be able to talk about these things, the things that Mexico is taking active part in, this storing water in the U.S. These are things that are demonstrations of community. We're all here together. And so that for us, as a binational organization, it's funny when I think about diversity, equity, and inclusion for the Sonoran Institute, it's part of what we do. More than half of our staff is in Mexico. We have Mexican leaders, we have US leaders. It isn't the defining characteristic, your nationality or your gender isn't the defining characteristic. I know for the people who are working within the organization, they may face challenges because of who they are, but within the organization, you're speaking Spanish, you're speaking English, we feel confident that we're giving people the forum to do what they need to do. So in terms of international issues, that is something we need to make more general. So, it's funny, but you can see how the Western United States and Northern Mexico share more than the East Coast or Mexico City. They have more in common. They have more community. They share some of the same family names. It's just like we're so mixed together, and yet we fight a lot, of course, but we've got a lot to build on in terms of community.
Well, we fight in this country between each other,
right?
too.
And so part of the Sonoran Institute is going, that is the big learning. Like, hey, I know they speak Spanish, they speak different tribal languages, whatever, but these are members of our community. We're one. It's one basin. It isn't the U.S. basin. It isn't the tribal basin. It isn't the Mexican basin. It is one basin. And water issues are helping bring that to the fore. But that's really, for us, Ethan, that has been where we draw most of our strength and where we see the biggest future in terms of moving that forward. That's the big one. If we can get that to continue to move forward as it has, we'll be doing really well. And there's a lot of challenges in that area. How water is used in Mexico, crossing the border into the U.S. or vice versa. And that's part of the puzzle. But that is where you will see a tremendous amount of opportunity for positive growth in terms of the environment and community.
Well, with leadership from someone with as much energy as you, I have no doubt that the projects will continue to thrive. One thing I read on your website that I thought was really cool was this project at the Las Arenas treatment wetland. Would you mind telling me a bit about that? Because that was really interesting.
Yeah, Las Arenitas is a wetland treatment plant. It's basically the idea is that nature can provide services for treatment of water. And so then that water can be reused in, go ahead.
What exactly is treatment of water also?
So if you have water that's been used for the sewage system, it comes out, you want to treat that water. If you funnel that into the wetland will help treat that water so that when it comes out the other side, it's usable for agriculture, other human uses. So you can take it through a process whereby giving water to nature will provide an element of solution, or what we call a green infrastructure solution. Instead of making everything gray, cement, building it out, the infrastructure, you use nature to help you clean the water. And so Las Arenitas is a very ambitious project aimed at doing that in Mexicali. And we think there are going to be a lot of applications for that same idea elsewhere throughout the West, in fact, northern Mexico and western United States, because wastewater treatment is an area of a lot of investment, and wastewater itself is one of the perhaps most underappreciated water resources in the West in terms of what it could be used for.
Well, absolutely. And I think we should not even use the word waste anymore because it's
Hmm.
these human feces is rich in carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus. I think I'm not a scientist. And that could be used as fertilizer. Nature doesn't waste anything. When animals defecate, it goes into the soils and it nourishes the plants. So if you could find a way, it's just it's just become exceedingly clear to me that the way we live is so ridiculously inefficient, and that's why we're having so many issues with the current ecological system, because we're putting things in places where they're not having any benefit at all. And wastewater is another example of that. So this project is using natural systems
Mhm.
to like, I don't, is it like half of it sounded like half of the area had like fresh water and the other half had like the wastewater, and there was something in the middle that was like filtering it with like plants or something.
Yeah, so you have just ponds, collection ponds, where they go through and then they get to the wetlands, where the wetlands will absorb the water as well, and you're slowly filtering it through a series of processes to reduce the waste content of the water. So it's exciting, it's innovative. It happens because we have great partnerships with the municipal authorities in Mexicali, with the Nature Conservancy, with Fundación Gonzalo Rio Arronte. There are a number of actors. When I say we, I don't mean we, the Sonoran Institute. I mean there's just a whole series of actors that take part in this that really make it possible to do these things that have the potential to generate major changes in how we interact with nature. Because
It's all,
nature has a role.
I mean, nature is everything. We're part of nature. Everything we make is technically still, but and whatever. Um, but what are your thoughts on making these type of conservation projects actually economically viable or enticing to a non-philanthropic investor, someone who's looking for returns?
Okay, if you look on return on investment, I've done a number of these projects in terms of there are different ways you look at it. One, carbon sequestration. We plant trees, it absorbs carbon. We measure the amount of carbon. Somebody gives us money for doing that. Or you plant trees and more water gets stored in the aquifer. And so, therefore, if I'm a beer company, I'm worried about water use, I give you money to do more of that because you're helping restore water. All of these systems, and even the wetland treatment, all of these systems add value to nature and provide a sort of tradable commodity, if you will, coming out the other side. The challenge with that for me is most of what we're doing for nature is priceless. And you're saying planting these trees and doing what you're doing has this value, which is for me fictitious because what you have there, some of the things we're losing now, you don't get back, right? It's not like, oh, I can buy another one and what this is priceless. It's just like you work in real estate. Some places have a view. That view is priceless. Yes, I know you put a price on it, but it's priceless. Being able to see the sunset from that spot, not that spot, is really important. And so to try to put a monetary value on that helps because I can go to you say, Ethan, if you invest, give me $10 million and I can show you that will generate $30 million in return for you. Water rights, easy one. Right now it's about, I can give you numbers as how much that water rights are worth and how much we could generate. But at the end of the day, we're talking about trying to do financial transactions with something that doesn't really have value. It's priceless. It's really, and so for me, I've done a lot of those sorts of transactions, and I think there's a limit to that. Business has to be involved. But business has to be involved not as a compensation. Business has to be involved as a change of the way I do things. So, example, why should you and I have to do recycling?
It's a waste of the like, when I was talking about before, it's a waste of resources not to recycle
Why aren't the companies that produce the plastic thinking maybe I should go in a different direction?
because it's cheaper to make plastic.
Right. They don't have to worry. They produce it, and when it goes out the door, it's not their problem.
But we should
Cell
price that
phone.
externality. They should be
Well, that's
responsible
one
for
way to
that
do
stuff.
it, right?
Yeah.
That's where we need to think about how things are working and help companies get to the right place. We will do all of the above. as we go forward. There's no doubt about it. But as I say, there are ways you can think about this that, say you're a mining company and you're looking out 50 years and you need water for the next 50 years, and you know well that you're not going to get any more Colorado River water. As strong as mining is in Colorado, Arizona, or California, and have these special rights worked out over the years, you kind of know which way the wind is blowing. You're not going to get any more resources. What can you do? Well, maybe one of your avenues would be if I invest in communities to hook up, say in Nogales, if I hook up 200,000 homes to the sewage system in Nogales where there is no sewage system, in exchange for them giving me those water rights for the used water, the effluent, I'm pretty sure I'm going to have water for the next 50 years and beyond coming from those toilets.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. That would work. And you can put a monetary value on how much it would cost you to invest in connecting these people. That's the sort of thinking that you need people to go through. Thinking, okay, water's a limited resource. We need it here. How do we get it here if I need it to do what I'm going to do? And those opportunities exist in a lot of different forms. And I think you'll see more of it as the water crisis grows, in terms of people who have long-term thought processes will go, well, how do I get water for the longer term? Where's that water going to come from? As you say, if it's a limited resource, where does it come from? How do I deal with it?
It's a huge question.
Mm-hmm.
What type of projects are you engaging with in your consulting business?
I don't do consulting anymore. When I was doing consulting, I was working throughout the Americas with all kinds of groups in terms of, healthcare, schools, sports, all sorts of nonprofits. The overriding need when I was doing consulting was, how do you inspire people to action?
Yeah.
Is it giving? Is it joining? Is it doing? Whatever it is, how do you get people's engines going to get them to take action? And that it has a lot to do with listening, because I need to listen to hear what the community is talking about. What is it that people are inspired by? What are their hopes, fears, dreams? How do you get engaged with that? And how do you engage on them in a way that's with integrity, that you're actually following through with what you say you're going to do, you do, and you bring something to bear that will change the outcomes. You in your case, in your business, you are making a case for that. I sell real estate. That's fine. I'm going to give half of my commissions to things that I believe in. That gets your motor running, your inspiration going. When I talk to folks on boards of nonprofits, you know what they hate doing the most? Asking people for money. That's what they say. They just hate doing that. They'll do anything. They'll give their time, whatever. But don't make me ask other people for money. If you ask people on boards, what do they like the most about being on the board of a non-for-profit? You know what they'll tell you?
What?
The ability to give.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And so then you say, well, why wouldn't you ask other people for money? You are denying them the single most thing that you enjoy the most as a board member, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's listening and saying, hey, there's a disconnect here. Listen to what they're saying, and then you can get to something where they go, aha, ding, the little light bulb goes on. I get it. I hear what you're saying. I got it. Okay. You don't have to lecture at them. You hold up the mirror and they can see what you're talking about.
Did you not find that the most effective way to get people inspired and fired up is storytelling?
Storytelling helps without a doubt. If you can tell a good story, there's no doubt that will help.
Yeah. I don't know. I think you like connecting with people on like an emotional or visceral level is the way you actually get them to action. Most of our people like to think that they're their thoughts and their, their human brain is really what's getting them to make choices. But at the end of the day, we really are still mostly, our evolution mostly comes from other animals. So we have these instincts that we act on, and most people are very controlled by how they feel about things. So if you can connect with them on that level and then connect that to an action, they're likely to take it. I don't know. Well, Mike, I appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast today. It's been great. I appreciate everything your organization is doing. Some really interesting, innovative things, and the listening is a trend I'm hearing. Of course, just giving people a chance to either feel heard and then processing their ideas and actually come up with something to add to that. People really appreciate that. So that's really cool. I just love to ask at the end, any advice you have for young people who are passionate about building a better world?
Wow. A lot of it has to do with doing it. I wasn't great at school. Going out and doing it, getting involved to the capacity that you can do it, because it helps you figure out a few key things. Are you really interested in doing this? Or is it something you say you're interested in doing? Which isn't bad. Half of life is figuring out what you don't want to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're not the type that knew you wanted to be a doctor when you grew up and could study towards that, if you're not that defined type personality, not figuring out what you don't like is just as valuable. So if you want to change the world you live in, do it where you find the most enjoyment. So combine it with what you do. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person, that you're not willing to work 8 hours a day in a soup kitchen. Maybe it's once a week and you get something out of it, they get something out of it. That's cool. Just do it where you find the sweet spot in terms of your commitment.
Yeah, because you're not going to be able to last long term doing something, at least with a lot of energy, unless you're really passionate about it, and you have to be introspective and find that out. When it comes to knowing what not to do, for me, it was like, as long as I don't work for someone else, I'll be good. So I struggled to find a way to do that, and that's gotten me to where I am today. And it's been a pleasure to have you, man. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me, and great job with the podcast. It's really exciting what you're doing.
I appreciate it, man. And all right, everybody, you're welcome. We'll see you soon.
Yep.
So if you or anyone else you know is looking to buy or sell a home anywhere in the USA and would like to create thousands of dollars in donations without any cost out of pocket, please visit ccrboulder.com today.